Hey guys, welcome back. It is your favorite Gimp with a Limp, and I'm here with one I know I'm not the only one that's excited for, and that is Age of Dogfights World War II. Now, I covered this game a little bit previously, where I just kind of went over an overview of what you can be expecting in the newest edition, but now I've got a little snippet of the updated rules, okay? And the cool part is, like I was guessing when I did the first video on this, so much of it is similar to what you've already seen that if you played Age of Dogfights 1, you're really going to jump right into this. It's not a huge change. Now, I was wrong that they are not directly interchangeable in the systems, but the systems are so close and using like the same components, same grid, same everything, that if you really want to, there's no reason you can't play it that way. I mean, just it's your game, you have fun with it. But no, they're not a direct correlation. So I was wrong on that. I do apologize on that. I'm human, I'm gimpy, I make mistakes. It's gonna happen. So what we're going to do is I am going to be covering this game more. I love the game. I love the system. I'm definitely a big fan of it. So I'm going to go over the differences in this video for the rules, right? And then we're going to do a playthrough session later on, either after the Kickstarter's gone on, or I might do one in between when the Kickstarter releases, finishes, and when the game comes out. We'll see how it plays out, but I definitely want you guys to understand the differences between the two game systems. So I've got some of the aircraft laid out here, a couple of P-51s, a couple of Messerschmitt 109, some extra little stands that we can move them around on. That way I can set up little gameplay examples for you guys so you can see what the differences in the rules are going to be. I brought the camera down and zoomed in a little bit closer so you can see a little bit easier here on the board. All right, so I've got the little player boards here. We're going to go over these types of things in this playthrough setup back and forth, just depending on what we're doing. Now, just to update you, I was correct. This number is like its little firepower number, and that's, you know, how strong its guns are. So basically, when you're performing your attacks, which is now a two-step instead of a one-step process, you'll add that number if you're the attacker, and then the defender is going to remove any durability. We'll go over all that here in a sec. But it is a real just innovative and sweet, easy to use system. But just so I can point this out, right here, if you see on this BF 109, that little annotated 2 there, right? It's got a couple of those. And the reason it's like that is because this type of aircraft only had so much of its heavier cannon ammunition. So as you're ticking off the ammo as you fire, the firepower is going to go down because it'll only have a couple of machine guns left on its last couple of rounds. So its firepower is a 4 to start, but it drops down to a 2 later on. Plus, over here, there's a booster. So on top of doing the green die, you do have a one-off boost, and to annotate the fact that you use that, you simply flip the little plastic counter over to show its hollow side, and it gives you a one-time boost of +3 to your roll. So you get the green die and that. I was also right with the blue dies being used for more agile aircraft. So if we look at all our die here, and this is not a guarantee of the final components, all right? These can still possibly be changed. So you have multiple different types of dice, and the more acrobatic that aircraft is, the more choice of dice that it has. So you always will have that one roll of a blue die you have to roll. You can choose to roll the green die instead, but you have to use the booster. That's if you want to go faster. And then you choose between the darker, which is going to have potentially faster, so like your positive numbers, all the way down to the lightest blue, which will have the smallest numbers. If you can see this, -6. I think that is the lowest that it goes. So if you want to cut a real sharp turn, that's when you're going to be using those dice. And obviously something like a bomber here is not going to have that agility. It's going to be slower and it's not going to be as agile, so it can't slow down and stop on a dime. And obviously you couldn't use that because that goes down to -6, and its speed is a 6, which means it would effectively stop. And these things are not helicopters. They don't stop in midair. So that's why those dice are limited. It does give your faster aircraft, though, like these have speeds of 12, 11, 13. They're going to go really quickly. So you can really have a whole lot of options. I love that in the game. All right, so something else when it comes to movement. I'm going to use the black one, see if it has a little less light glare on it. Actually, we'll turn it. There we go. All right, so this Messerschmitt, or yeah, the 109 here, when you're making your turns, we had gyroscopic effects in World War One, which had to do with the rotation of the propeller of the aircraft and the engine, all that. Don't have to worry about that in this. But you can't make consecutive turns in opposite directions in this game. They did decide on that. So let's say this aircraft goes forward, and we'll push these out of the way, and it decides it wants to turn to the right, and it goes to its next step. It could not then turn to the left. All right. Now they do have a one-off special rule for zigzagging aircraft, but for the basic principles, understand you can't do that. So going forward, you make a turn, go up to your next point. You can either continue to go straight, or you could continue on the direction that you were turning, but you can't turn in that opposite direction until you've had at least one going in the straight direction. And then it will also depend on how fast you're going, how many movement steps you're going to be making in total versus your turning frequency. So that's what this is referring to here. At least one step if you're going so fast. You make consecutive if you're going so slow. And if you're going really fast, it could be up to 2 steps in between each one of your turns, because you're going around, you're screaming in there, so you got to get a lot more going on. Now, because of that rule is why we have these types of altitude stands now, where it shows the aircraft in a bank. Because if you finish your move, right? So let's say this aircraft is flying along and its last move was a turn. Then you're going to leave it rolled like that. So that's the angle that it's going to be in. And you keep track of that because on its next move, it couldn't start with that left turn. If it's banking to the right like this, the next time it's going to activate, it couldn't do boom to start off with. It could continue its turn on along around because it's banking, or it could level out and fly straight, at which point you would put it onto one of the regular altitude stands. But you can't just, keep going that way. And that's something you now have to keep track of, but it's also going to come into play when we have aircraft attacking each other. Because, all right, and we'll get into this a little more specific here in just a sec, but if this guy ended here and this P-51 ended right here behind him, prepared to take a shot, well, they're right behind each other. This is the perfect firing position in Age of Dogfights 1, with the exception that now you have that ability to be banked over. So this would actually incur a penalty when the P-51 is firing, because they're not both at the same level. Now, while we're still talking about movement, just to show you this as well, if we look on the aircraft, you notice that there is a climbing and diving symbol with numbers next to it. That's the aircraft's maximum and minimum when it comes to climbing and diving. Each aircraft is going to have that listed down showing you. And then especially on your acrobatic aircraft, mainly your fighters, you'll have a symbol like this, which just represents that those special maneuvers, all right, the split ass or Emmelman turns, things like that. They are obviously making a comeback into this game, so those maneuvers are available to these types of aircraft, just like they were in Age of Dogfights 1. And just to show you another new symbol, this one right there, that little kind of straight down arrow, represents an aircraft that can make a steeper dive, and it can go farther as far as like making a steep dive is concerned than normal aircraft can. But that hasn't been fully fleshed out yet as far as the rules are concerned. They're still kind of playtesting that a little bit, so we will expand on that when we know a little more about it. All right, so the big thing I really wanted to touch on this game is its new firing, shooting. That's what we look forward to. We want to shoot enemy aircraft, and that has changed fairly substantially from the first game. I will give it to it. So we're looking at this little chart now, and this threw me off when I was first looking at it because this didn't make any sense from the way Age of Dogfights 1 was done. And that's because it is now a two-step system. But I think it's easier and a little deeper at the same time, which I like. Now, we still have A position and B position. The A being you're in the best spot. So generally right behind your opponent, things like that. Now, there are modifiers when it comes to this. We'll touch on those just a sec. But if you're firing from a different angle, something like this, then you're going to be in the B position. And there's modifiers for that, depending on altitude, pitch, roll, all that good stuff. So you're going to have just a single D6 roll to determine if you hit. And then you're going to have a 2D6 roll to determine the effects of that hit. So again, depending on your position, tells you whether it's A or B. Roll 1D6, apply any modifiers, and then do a 2D6 roll. And this is where other modifiers can come into play as well. And it tells you whether or not it's going to be unaffected, damaged, or destroyed. So in a situation like this, where we've got the 109 with a P-51 right behind it, all right? Bam. That's like the perfect A position, all right? Just as an example. But that can change. Think of it as for each step away from this is a negative penalty when it comes to a modifier. So if the 109 is tilted up, for example, that's going to be a penalty because they're not on the same plane. They're not flying exactly in line with each other for the best shot. So that's going to throw things off. If they are both in line with each other, but farther away, so a couple of spaces like this, that's still going to be an A position, but that's going to be a -2 modifier. So when you are rolling here, that's when those modifiers are going to come into play. Your positional modifiers apply to your firing position, obviously. So depending, right? So here, no modifier. If they're tilted whichever way, if they're rolling, if you're firing up at them, if you're anything but square right behind them, there's probably going to be a modifier to it where it's -1, -2, up to -3 off of this roll, reducing your chances. So just as an example, if our P-51 here is level, as another example, should I say, and it's 2 spaces behind, the extra space is a -1 modifier. And then the fact that our 109 here is angled down, so he's descending, would be another negative modifier. So this shot would be a -2 to the firing position. Now, just to show you guys, and let me find a good spot to put this in because the light keeps washing out these little stickers. There is actually one B position where you get a positive modifier, and it's this, where like the aircraft flies into like a stream of bullets. So here you would actually get a +1, increasing your chances. Still on the B because you're not behind them, you don't have the best firing position, but you would actually get a +1, making it to where 3 and up is actually going to get you the hit. All right, so let's say our guys are flying around, the P-51 fires at this 109 and it rolls, it gets a hit. What happens from there? All right, so that's where we're going to look at doing our 2d6 roll and applying any modifiers. Well, those modifiers are going to be its firing strength. So for our P-51, that's going to be a 6. So you're going to add 6 to that roll, but you subtract the durability of your target, which is the number of those small little black pips right there. See, there's 2 pips here, so that has a durability of 2. So this would get a 4 added to whatever the 2d6 roll is when determining your damage. And that's going to apply with all your aircraft, because all of these aircraft do have some type of durability. If there is no durability, because I think there are a couple of aircraft that are very light in the World War II version that will have like a 0 for durability, then obviously they're not going to get that negative to help bring down potential damage for them. So those high firing numbers, those fighters with those cannons, can cause a lot of damage. Remember, again, there is the damage thing. You're going to roll your dice just like you did before to determine what type of damage is done, whether it's to the wings, the engine, the weapons, tail, what have you, and put your markers on just like we did in Age of Dogfights 1. Now, the difference of that comes into play with an aircraft like this, our B-17. And you see its durability is a 6, but it's got that box around it. That box means that this one can take a couple hits of damage and still stay in the air. Remember, in the first one, just like in this one, a single damage hit, the plane could continue to fly. 2 damage, the plane is considered destroyed. That still applies here unless the aircraft has a durability with that box around it. Then it can take an extra point of damage and still keep up there hooking and jabbing. And I was right when it came to this stuff. So looking at our B-17 here, it's got a lot of machine guns around it. And you also notice that it has no weapon tracker. And I was a little curious about that when I was doing the first video. The reason is these planes, aircraft like this, are considered to have carried so much machine gun ammo for their crews that they're not very likely to run out during a mission. Is it possible? Yes, but for game simplicity's sake, they went this route, just infinite ammo, rather than trying to keep track of it, because it would be a very long set of boxes to have to move the marker through to determine it, and this just worked out a lot better. A little less bookkeeping to keep track of. Now you see for him, it's flexible damage up to 7 because it's flexible all the way around. Now what you're looking at here is the firepower number, and this is again like a reactive shot, if they have someone shooting at them. We have the same type of break action in this game that we do in Age of Dogfights 1. You take some fire from an enemy fighter, and then you get to fire your machine guns back at them. Now, what you're looking at when you're looking at these 3 numbers here is the first one with the line through it. That's if the enemy aircraft is level. So the directly behind this B-17, that 6 is if the enemy aircraft is directly on the same level. So if they were on level, well, they go up to 10. If they were on level 10 and the enemy aircraft's on level 10, that's the number they're going to use. And then the 2 numbers next to it are whether they are higher or lower. So real easy to determine. If they're higher, it drops down to a 5. If they're lower, it drops down to a 4. And then all the way around, it was saying how they went through and analyzed the different types of aircraft and how many machine guns they could cover each sector with to determine these types of fire numbers. So they could get a whole lot of machine guns facing this direction or this direction. And it helped them determine what the firepower should be in all of these different directions, depending on the enemy aircraft level. All right, and a couple other things that I learned in the new rules, and this hasn't been fully fleshed out yet, but this is the basic premise of it. All right, was the endurance. Now, obviously, we knew endurance was going to have to do with their fuel, basically how much time they could have up on station before they had to fly back. This goes up to 23. You can add drop pods to it, depending on what type of aircraft it is, but basically how long they could stay there. And the reason you're going to keep track of that is if your scenario has P-51s flying in from Britain and they're fighting over Germany, obviously they're going to have used fuel flying all the way from the UK into Germany to conduct their dogfight, and that needs to be accounted for. And that's where these new entrance boards do come into it. That's what these little markers are for down here. So your endurance is going to kind of play into it on how long your aircraft can stay in the fight before they need to turn tail and head back for home because they're going to run out of fuel. And you can keep track of that with your markers here. So these, again, these are like the new entrance boards, like the patrol area from Age of Dogfights 1, right? So you would place these up against the edge of the board, and this is where your aircraft that were not on the board in the fight would come in later. So you can keep track of how many turns you've had. Like I said, it's not completely fleshed out. They're still playtesting this just a little bit, but that's going to be the basic gist when it comes to endurance, is determining where your scenario is taking place. So depending on which side you are, you're either going to have less or more, depending on if your aircraft had to fly farther to get there or not. And these things like external drop pods for fuel, bombs, things like that, they are going to play into account when it comes to things like your movement as well, because having an external fuel tank means that you have to reduce your speed by 1 while you still got that thing. So it actually slows down your aircraft. I like how they have that little rule in there to kind of simulate the real world effects of having that aerial drag. Now, there was one other thing that I was curious about, and that was these little cubes with the stickers on them. I was like, okay, what is this? What the hell does this mean? Because I could not figure it out. These are actually a nice player quality of life improvement. There was a optional rule in Age of Dogfights 1 that I didn't use, and to be honest, I'm probably not going to use this one in Age of Dogfights 2, just because it's a little more admin than I would prefer. But this has to do with keeping track of the difference between the speed of your aircraft and the target, right? So if you came in so fast and they're flying by you so fast, that could have certain modifiers when it came to conducting certain attacks. That way you could use these to show the difference in the speed between the aircraft instead of just writing that down. Definitely makes it easier. You can just put the little cube right next to the aircraft. Nice. But that's up to you. That's an optional rule. I personally just don't care too much for, because I play these games solitaire, and there's enough bookkeeping to worry about without having to try to keep track of the speed differences, because I know I would butcher that. Now, that's just me. Now, I'm not saying bad about the game or anything. That's just a personal qualm. And just to point out a few other things that they are also working on and still updating and are going to play a much bigger role here in Age of Dogfights 2 is going to be things like your bombing runs, your reconnaissance runs, anti-aircraft fire, the anti-aircraft zones that you can put on the board. Those are going to be back into this game as well. I showed you guys the pieces in the previous video. All that's going on, but bombing is going to play a much larger role now, especially when you have these huge dedicated bombers. They could have multiple runs, like they drop bombs worth so many points and they have to do so many points to the target zone to count it as a victory. It's not really going to be just a fly over it and you've dropped your bomb like it was in Dogfights 1. Now you've got points and size of bombs to concern yourself with, like how many bombs they can drop, what size, all that good stuff for these bombers. So your bombing missions are going to be bigger, more in depth. Same with your reconnaissance missions and the things that can interfere with that, like your anti-aircraft fire. All right, so that's just the quick down and dirty differences of Dogfights 1 to Dogfights 2. It's like I said in the previous one, they went through and figured out what people liked, what they didn't. They're trying to upgrade it, bring a little more nuance to it. The fact that they got faster, bigger, more powerful aircraft. They're trying to keep it realistic with the fact that certain aircraft run out of cannon ammo quicker. Obviously, these aircraft are more maneuverable. They can dive farther, fly faster, all the other good stuff. So they've been incorporating new rules, but streamlined rules, things that can be shown in something as simple as this, right? I like that. Just this little sheet right here tells me most everything I need to know with, how fast the aircraft's going. Is it going to have to go so many spaces in between each one of its turns? Real simple stuff like that. I like that. I think they're doing good with this. The big thing is, if you played Age of Dogfights 1, you're just going to jump in. You're not going to have a hard time picking up 2 at all, I don't believe. And if you didn't play 1, but you're interested now in 2, yeah, absolutely, definitely a good place to jump in. I gotta say, come on, who doesn't love a P-51 or 109s or Spitfires, or all the good stuff, B-17s that we've all played in all our different types of games. And now they're coming into a game like this. Yeah, absolutely gonna love it. Plus, depending on what type of expansions you decide to get, you can get involved with jet aircraft or gliders or any of that cool stuff. So a lot of options there for you. I'm really definitely looking forward to this. Like I said, stay tuned. I'm going to poke around a little bit more. Definitely talking to them, see if I can get a copy of the fully finalized rules when they do get there, because they're final little tweaks. I like it. They're tweaking it up to the last minute to make it as good as possible. So as soon as I have some of that stuff on hand, I will take and play a little game for you guys. If you have some specific aircraft you'd like to see, like I lean towards P-51s because I like P-51s. But if you want to see Spitfires or Fokker Wolves or whatever, by all means, definitely let me know. Remember in the previous video, I went through all the aircraft that I have on hand now. So check that one out, see which aircraft I have, and you guys let me know, and I'll see if I can put together a quick little game to show you how the system's going to work. But the big thing, especially with the adjustment, I really, really like this adjustment. Having 2 roles now, I've been thinking about that for a little bit, and I really like that. I think it gives a little more game to it, because before you just had 1 role, right? And this allows them to adjust, did you hit, so they could focus on the position of the aircraft, those modifiers, and then they could focus on the firepower and durability of the aircraft with these modifiers. I like how that's been divided out a little bit instead of having it all into 1 role. But if you guys have any questions, feel free, put it down below. Other than that, that's going to be it for this one. You guys take care. I'll see you in the next one.